There she goes, first solo drive.
Are we ready for this?
Absolutely.
Our AAA agent, what are you doing here?
Well, same as always, helping you protect what matters most. Like when you added her to your auto policy, or when you switched to AAA insurance and saved.
So you've been here the whole time?
Yep, plus we're available 24/7 for claim support, in case you ever need it.
Shouldn't she be home already?
It's been 12 seconds.
Visit AAA.com/insurance to get a quote today.
When you're a maintenance engineer in a beverage manufacturing plant, you keep production lines moving and quality on track because there's no room for slowdowns. With Grainger's vast selection of high-quality motors, sensors, belts, and hard-to-find parts, you can get what you need fast and all in one place, so nothing gets in the way of getting the job done. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Welcome to the Fantasy Footballers DFS and Betting Podcast with your hosts, Kyle Borganoni and Matthew Betz.
Welcome back. It's Friday, August 14th here. Fantasy Footballers DFS and Betting Podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Borganoni, and I'm joined, as always, by Matthew. Well, hello, Betz.
Kyle. Dude, come on, man.
That's how you greet me every time we get on the podcast.
That was so weak. I mean,
That's how you greet me.
People need the Friday energy, dude. Come on. You're supposed to be the guy that brings it in, starts. I mean, people are revving up their lawnmower, Kyle. They're getting ready to watch some preseason football to play DFS. The important things in life. And you just come in with that lame nickname. I'm not mad, Kyle. I'm not mad, just disappointed, as a parent would say.
I don't know if you know you do this, but every single time we log on, which, hundreds and hundreds of times, you greet me with your mic check is, well, hello.
It's either that or what's up, nerd?
That is true. It's something like that. Where, I'm just, trying to be professional. Trying to come in here, get the job done. The thing is that corporate's just on my back right now.
I know. They're telling us to go door to door with these UDK sales. We have to report every Friday how many UDKs we sold in our neighborhoods, at the bus stop, at our neighbors' doors, at the grocery store. I mean, it's stressful times here for Borg Betz, but we're getting through. I sold 2 this week, so we're good.
Nice. Yeah, it's tough, when you are outside the grocery store and you see the Boy Scouts and the Girl Scouts, and they're taking your territory, and you're trying to show what a UDK is. Like, they have popcorn for sale, Girl Scout cookies, and here's me, just my little table. And, I got the same thing. I got my coffee mug. I say, change my mind. And then I showed him a UDK.
Okay, now this is a very important conversation. Where are you at with Girl Scout cookies? You in, you out? What are your favorite flavors? This is important.
They take up a very, very small percentage of my life, to the point of I don't seek them out. And I definitely don't want to be sought out in front of a grocery store. I don't need the sob story of the Scouts telling me where I need to spend my money. I'm going into a grocery store to buy something. So, Thin Mints, you put them in the freezer.
Yes. Dude, that is an awesome summer treat. Good call.
Yeah. No, I'm fine with that. But everything else, I'm not trefoiling. I'm not tag-a-logging.
Oh, I do like tag-alongs. Those are the peanut butter ones, right?
I think so.
I haven't had them in years.
Yeah. It's not the UDK, I'll tell you that. It's not. It doesn't taste the same.
Listeners, if you have one chance to purchase something from your local, salesman or woman, it's not the Thin Mints, it's the UDK. I mean, come on.
It is a really, really fun season for us in August, where all the hard work for the Ultimate Draft Kit, we kind of get to see lots of people starting their drafts using the mock draft tool. And right now, we are doing a giveaway where you can win the UDK for life if you have bought the Ultimate Draft Kit or you're an Ultimate Foot Clan member. You're already entered in, but you have to order it before August 24th. We do this giveaway once a year. And I had a friend recently who bought the UDK and then heard the other day on the podcast about this, and he's like, can I get entered in? I said, yes, you are. You also could win a signed Jamar Chase jersey. but he like really like did the math in his head. He was adding up how much money he's going to save if he wins this for life. And he asked if I could put in a good word. And I said, I don't know, maybe it's a drawing, but there's a little bit of power there.
Hey, I mean, come on. Little Andy Jackson, slide it over on the table, put it in your pocket, and yeah, we'll put in a good word. It's funny. I've never heard of the Girl Scouts doing cookies for life. I mean, give me a freaking break, dude. So yeah, UDK over everything.
Yeah, they couldn't foresee that type of marketing, that type of imitation.
Not like our team. I mean, marketing moguls. Am I right?
Yep. On this episode, Betz and I are going to talk DFS strategy. We got some questions that came in on our Discord. We've done a DFS strategy episode for the last 6 years, and we will touch on a lot of the points that we've done before, but I thought I wanted to refresh it, get it new. If you've been playing cash for a while, you've been playing GPP, we did want to give you, just another level of conversation. I feel like the people that listen to this podcast, you're not dumb. You're not an idiot. And so because of that, we don't want to treat you like idiots.
No, people that listen to the show are super smart. I will say, though, we do have new folks coming in every year, which is awesome. So it's always tricky because we don't want to, gloss over some of the basic stuff. But if you've been listening for a while, like obviously a lot of that stuff. So if you ever miss something that Kyle and I are talking about, or you want more clarification, like Discord's an awesome place to chat through that in the DFS channel, whether it's from Kyle and I or Chris or anybody else that's in there. Lots of sharp minds in there, so it's a great resource. Make sure you're using it.
Yeah, and don't feel bad if everybody has to start somewhere with DFS, with betting, with props. And so just even saying that, there's so many gracious, awesome people that love teaching, that love being able to walk through how do you handle a cash slate? Like, what does cash even mean? And going from there. So feel free to reach out in Discord, ballersdiscord.com. I have a quick question for us as we are inching closer to week 1. Now, if you play preseason DFS, congratulations. Maybe Haynes King last Thursday night just changed your life. Maybe it was one of those things where you're just like Panthers, Cardinals, it does it for you. But I wanted to ask you this question, Betz, because I think a lot of times people hear about us, they call us professionals because we do this for a living, and they're really just asking, like, what does your process look like? So my question is, what is one part of your weekly DFS prep process that you cannot live without? In other words, if you're going to tell somebody one thing you do throughout the week, what would it be?
I think, so for me, this might be different than most folks, and obviously you and I are similar in this, in that we are thinking about, talking about, writing about football for 5 or 6 days leading up to the slate. 99% of people, when they're done with work on a Friday or a Saturday, they're like, all right, let me see what's going on the Sunday slate. And they log in and they start to digest the information initially. And so for me, the thing that I need as far as my process is a Saturday where I'm not thinking about NFL DFS. Of course, if there's an IR move or an injury update or something that we need to update some stuff on the back end, like we're doing that. But I'm trying to use that day to kind of unplug, reset. You and I don't like scout college football in season for Dynasty and stuff like that, but we do enjoy college football Saturdays. You and I both have young kids. So that day away to kind of just breathe for a minute and then come back in Sunday ready to go is something that I cannot live without in my weekly process. I will also say too, the Sunday morning scramble, sometimes is what it feels like, can be good and bad. And what I mean by that is, like, if there's a major injury and we have a value running back open up, they have a surprising, quarterback out, we now have a 4K quarterback at play, like obviously those things matter and you have to adjust. But I will say, most of the time when I get to like late Friday, sometimes early Saturday, I'm thinking about the slate on a cup of coffee, I kind of feel like I already have my ideas and my takes of how I want to attack the slate. And then sometimes, like, 36 hours later, you're just like scraping the whole thing and starting fresh. But like, don't forget about what you thought about leading up to the week, right? So I think for me, just staying level-headed through the weekend and not like chasing each little blurb of news, I think is super, super important for me. So that's something that I try to really focus on each week in the season.
Yeah, I really want to echo what you said about Saturdays, because you and I both like college football. I know our families watch a lot of college football. So that is part where I get to unplug and just like enjoy football and enjoy watching college football and not overthinking so many things that like one tweet or one chart you saw from somebody just all of a sudden changes everything that you've been looking at when it comes to projections, roster percentages, all that stuff. It's like, okay, well, I had a process throughout the week. And I wrote an article a couple years ago. We did a podcast, I can't remember, 2024, 2023, about what does a weekly strategy and schedule look like. if you want to look on the website, but just basically Monday through Sunday, like what can you do each day if you only have a little bit of time? Like I know for a lot of people, it's like, I don't even have, more than like 5 hours during the week to listen to a couple podcasts or write down some notes and build lineups. You can still have a profitable week and play DFS the right way. So that's something you and I talk about a lot. Another thing that I cannot stress enough is that if you reserve your contests ahead of time, Thursday, Friday, whatever, then you will not scramble on a Sunday and start just adding a bunch of contests. I know sometimes it can be tempting when you look at certain contests, especially later on in the year. You're like, maybe there's overlay here. Maybe this contest won't fill. And if I just entered this one at the last moment without any thinking, then I will be the one to rake that money in.
Yep. I've done that before. And I think I mentioned this last week, that generally speaking, those contests are ones that I don't do well in because, if you're new to this, there's like a nuanced conversation around this, but like people that have played for a long time probably understand a tournament lineup is not a tournament lineup, right? Like if I'm playing in a field with like 75 to 100 people to 200 people, which is kind of where I live most of the time in DFS small field, that lineup should look way different than a contest that has 200,000 people in it. And sometimes if you're trying to do that and you're like, oh man, like there's 5,000 left and there's 10 minutes to lock, like this might not fill. And all of a sudden you're just throwing lineups that you created previously into this massive large field contest. Like that lineup might not be good for that contest, right? So you need to make sure that what you're doing from a lineup building standpoint matches your contest selection. And when you, at the very last second, start just adding more and more and more, it's hard to build the right type of lineups for those contests.
If you are building a cash lineup, which we will talk about part of that process on this mailbag episode, one of the things that I do every single week on a Friday, a little bit on Saturday, try to take a break on Saturday, but Sunday morning, is I'm looking at my lineups and I'm looking at the trade-offs, the opportunity cost, if I have in this player or this combination of other players. So usually when Betz and I record and the podcasts come out on a Friday, we have a core group that you and I say, like, these are the pool of players I'm looking at. I'm not locked into everybody, but usually we'll say something, or I need to be more careful to say this, because sometimes on the podcast I'm like, I'm definitely building my lineup with this guy, and then like an injury news happens a day later, I'm like, crap, I said it on the podcast and everybody. But you need to like see the projections trade off. So you need to be able to see, if I have this combination, am I trading a couple of points of projection here just because I like these players? Like when I see people in our Discord, they're talking about their lineups, they're showing screenshots of their lineups, and there's such good conversation of saying, hey, if you have this wide receiver instead, is that going to hurt you? Are you trading a couple of opportunities and targets if you do this? So that part of the process, I think, is so helpful, as opposed to, do you like this cash lineup? Like that's the question I get tagged in a ton. It's like, well, what are you trading off? What are the different, avenues that you're trying to go? So that part of the process, I think on a Friday, Saturday, Sunday is so important, as opposed to just landing at a lineup and not knowing why.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to put it. When you were talking about that, that question that you get asked a lot, like, is this a good cash lineup? That's hard to answer, right? Because
I just say it's terrible. It's total crap.
I would personally never do that. It's so hard to answer because, like, there are moments where that lineup will look pretty good, but then if there's a major value that opens up and it kind of unlocks higher projected lineups and you're not pivoting for those things, then on a Saturday morning, that lineup might have been a great cash lineup. And by Sunday, it's like, I think you're leaving too much projection on the table. So it is one of those things that you just, like I mentioned, it's a balance for me where like on the weekend, I want to unplug a little bit, monitor the news to some degree and have your takes and your priors, but be willing to adjust if we do get enough information throughout the weekend. But yeah, that's a tough one to answer. Is this a good lineup? What contests are you playing in? How many people? What's the entry fee? All these sort of things. So impossible question to answer. I think you say this every year on the show. You're like, please do not ask me that in Discord because it's literally impossible to answer. It's not a yes or no answer.
It's like when somebody asks me for best ball, is this player a good pick? And I'm like, well, how's the rest of your lineup constructed? And like, what are you pairing him with? What are you banking on this player to be? It's like, there's just so many variables, and maybe that's where my brain is. But I do want to encourage you, We're in mid-August. You can start a process. If you're one of those people with DFS, you're like, I want to start all over, or I want to be renewed, or I want to look at it in a different way this year. There are so many people in our Discord that are super helpful and articles where we've talked about our own process, but I just still tell people my favorite part is the Monday, Tuesday, like the slow grind throughout the week is still super rewarding. It's why you and I come back to this, and it's why I tell people all the time, like DFS is still my favorite format. Like I love my home leagues. I love, Dynasty. You and I have a podcast on that, but like DFS is its own format and ecosystem. And if you develop a process, it's fun. It's addicting.
It is. It's the best form. Obviously, we're not biased when we say that, but it's the best form of fantasy.
Not at all. All right, let's take a quick break and we'll be right back.
You're listening to this podcast, so you've got a curious mind. Here's a helpful fact. Drivers who switch and save with Progressive save over $900 on average. Visit Progressive.com to see if you could save on car insurance. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. National average 12-month savings of $946 by new customers surveyed who saved with Progressive between June 2024 and May 2025. Potential savings will vary.
Grainger knows when you're a procurement manager for an office park, you're not managing one building. You're managing all of them. And to stay ahead, you need to see through walls and around corners. Lights about to fail, filters ready to clog, HVAC on its last leg. If you wait until something breaks, you're already behind. Count on Grainger for quality products, easy reordering, and 24/7 support. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
All right, we're about to hop in the mailbag, but Betz, I do need to inform you that I'm about to have a whirlwind of a weekend, my friend. I'm going to see you very soon in Phoenix in a couple of weeks at the live show.
Yes, can't wait.
But I get on a plane early tomorrow morning, 7 a.m., to go to L.A.
Wow.
with my son.
Wait, so you're going to L.A. this weekend?
Yes.
Phoenix the next weekend?
I think that's 2 weeks from
Okay,
there.
Phoenix in 2 weeks, and then Phoenix again in 3 weeks for another draft.
Correct.
Brother, you are racking up the miles.
I know. But Dodgers-Brewers game?
Oh, you're going to
Jacob
that?
Mizorowski. Yeah, Mizorowski's pitching on Saturday.
Awesome, dude. That's going to be fun.
Yeah, me and my 10-year-old, that's what he wanted for his birthday. He said, I just want to go see the Dodgers. And I was like, I happen to pick a game that happened to be, an elite game. So we'll be doing that for a couple days. Hopefully I'll survive. And then you and I, Chris Cash, a lot of people will be at the live show in Phoenix in a couple of weeks. There's been talk, before I hit this button, there's been talk of a little group Chili's hangout.
Oh, brother, you tell me when and where, and I'll have the margs ready at the table for us.
My wife, she has a girls' night planned with some friends in Phoenix, but she's like, now, are you guys going? Is this like just like a bit? You guys are going to Chili's, or like, do you really want to go, or are you going to a different restaurant? I didn't answer.
Come on. There's no such thing as stupid questions. That was a stupid question.
I'll tell her you said that.
Mailbag.
All right. We're going through some DFS strategy questions that were posted in our Discord. And I just like that anytime people do have a question, it's going to get answered. We also have an optimizer channel that Chris Cash is just a baller in that channel. If you have questions about how the optimizer works, we will start talking week 1 salaries very soon. So this first question is from the Fresh Prince of Hilaire. So classic Clyde Edwards-Hilaire reference right here. It said, hey guys, I'm curious if there's anything you think the DFS community in general overthinks. You mentioned last week about bringbacks and how they aren't always needed. Just got me thinking about anything else we think about way too much, trying to be too smart. And I like the way he phrased it, because this is how we all go about it. I'm trying to be smarter than the other people, and if I just find this one piece of information, maybe I will be. So anything off the top of your head that you think we overthink?
I think the first thing that came to mind for me was the reaction to the weather.
That's a great one.
Every year, right? There's like 2 or 3 weather slates, and obviously it usually happens later in the season, but there's always a couple where it's like, hey, the weather, it's going to snow, man. It's going to snow. It's going to rain. Aren't you worried about the rain? And then all of a sudden, what was projected to be downpours for the entire game is like for a quarter, and it didn't really matter, and like I keep reminding myself, and I get in trouble doing this too. Like people love to post on socials, hey, I live in this city. Look at how hard it's raining right now. And it's like 3 hours before kickoff, right? And people freak out. And like, I try to remind myself that is all, for the most part, baked into the lines. It's baked into the spread in terms of the Vegas spread. It's baked into the total. It's baked into projections. And so when you see those things moving as a result of weather, then yes, we should, factor that in. We should consider it. We should use it as a piece of data. But I think what a lot of people do is they'll see like a total move from like, 48.5 to 47.5. And people are like, the total's dropping in this Cincinnati and Baltimore game. Like, you can't play that game. And it's like, it only moved a single point. And also it's still the third highest on the entire slate, right? Like, so I don't want to say ignore any weather things that you see because yes, it matters. But at the same time, if you're looking at Vegas lines and the weather, and you're logged on Twitter for 4 hours on a Sunday morning, and you're double counting in projections, like you can talk yourself out of really good plays. And I think that's one that we love to think we have an edge in weather. Nobody knows what the heck the weather's going to do, right? So I used to be a weather guy. I'm not a weather guy anymore. I don't care about the weather.
The internet every once in a while morphs into weather guys and gals.
three weeks a year.
It is funny, like just a side note, how we as a society, because everybody gets to have their opinion, free speech, but also like social media, you get to say whatever you want. Like everyone becomes like experts of whatever is currently going on, it in so many different areas in life. But weather is one of the funny ones because we know like how not great predicting weather is for meteorologists. And then we try to take that and then put it in a game that already is chaotic. Football in itself has so many other variables going on, and it's usually baked into the projections. So I'm with you. We have an article on the website called Weather Really Matters. And I think I've referenced that for the last like 10 years, like just over and over and over again about what that means and what that looks like. We have to do that throughout the regular season. Like I bet we will have this conversation 30 times this year.
Now, I will say, so what I was mentioning, like, I don't really care about weather, yada, yada. The only thing that I will say is like, if you're building a cash lineup and you just want to say, hey, I want the highest floor projection possible. I want to avoid a ton of risk. Like, sure, maybe there's 2 wide receivers that are $100 apart on DraftKings. You can fit either one if you want. They both project within like, 3/4 of a point. And you say, hey, look, in this one instance, I'm going to take the guy playing in 75 degrees and sunny versus the guy playing in 38 degrees and whipping rain. Okay, sure, I get that. But for the most part, don't freak out, don't overreact. I think we all do that to some degree.
I think one that really grinds my gears, I will say this.
Old man yelling at the clouds. Here we go.
It's when I see people use lines for props as if they are a projection. Those are not the same thing, right? Like when I see DK Sportsbook puts out this line in week 1 for Van Jefferson or whoever.
The worst part about the Steph Diggs signing?
Is that we will never be able to bet Van Jefferson.
I mean, barring injury, we're not going to get Van Jefferson lines, and I was planning to put the kids through college with those bets this year.
But like, if it's at 12.5, that is a line that the sportsbook has put there, hopefully in a really good spot so that people will bet both sides of it. Like that's what they're trying to do. Not so much saying, we think Van Jefferson will get 12 yards. Like it's to engage people in placing their bets, which is why you and I talk all the time about like season-long props are there to entice betting, but not necessarily saying this is exactly what people are going to get. You look at some receiving yardage lines, you're like, man, this guy could easily go over 1,000. He could hit 1,200, and the line's at like 887 or whatever. Or I know the other day we took one with Rashee Rice. It's like, we know that Rashee Rice can do all this stuff. They're putting a line there to entice betting, not so much saying this is a real median projection.
I think that's a really good point, not just for stuff that happened in season, but also for best ball right now and like your season-long drafts. I think people love to point to the season-long prop line, and I'm not saying it's not good to use them. Like it's fine to have a resource of like, man, like the books are really, they're lining this guy pretty aggressively. I'm not really into him. Maybe I should at least consider a couple shares. Like that type of stuff I think is fine. But the problem with that is like those lines are a median projection. And we took a Rashee Rice under, right? The knee still doesn't look 100%. We think the offense probably is a little more run heavy now that they have Ken Walker and Mahomes coming off injury, like, all those things. But like at some point in your draft, Rashee Rice is a good pick, right? Like the right tail outcomes on what if Rashee Rice is fully healthy and goes for 1,200 yards and scores 10 times. He's an awesome pick. But we're not rewarded in props the same way, where it's like, this is yes or no, did you win or lose? You don't win more if he goes for fewer and fewer yards. You win the same amount if he has 1 yard less than the line or 1,000 yards less than the line, right? So it doesn't matter. And so I really think using those lines to formulate best ball and player takes and even redraft takes or in-season weekly takes, again, can be helpful, but really can lead you astray because they're not the same market. And sometimes, even on the show, we will take an under on a player and be like, hey, but in a tournament, when you're chasing the right talk, I'm like, I'll play this guy at 3%, So just be careful copying and pasting that.
No, that's a good point that we try to emphasize. There are different markets for every single player. So it's possible to like a player in Dynasty, to love them in DFS that week, to be able to take the under of his props. Like, it's just, there's so many other ways that you can look at a player. And so that was one of mine, is just binary thinking. A lot of times of like, it's either this pick or that pick. And a lot of times it's like, well, they both could work, actually. There's a third door here. So a lot of that stuff, I think, shows up on social media. I talked last week about the analysis part, that I'm guilty of doing this too, of like over-analyzing and going through so many advanced metrics or coverage things that like, I like learning about those things, but they more describe than say, this is what will happen. And a lot of times when we talk about coverage, we're talking about something that happens like 20% of the time on the field. That's not enough to actually make a educated guess in DFS. That's more of like, this is a little bit of a lean. So when I bring those things up, like coverage, I try to bring up the outlier teams. Like, the Vikings are an outlier defense. The way that they play is very different than any other team. Or the Jaguars a couple years ago were like heavy man coverage, to the point of like, this team is different than any other team. So those are the things that matter, but I think people overthink them too much.
Yep, I agree with that.
All right, next one's from Matt Casey, 22. He said, with what you discussed last week regarding bringbacks not being as effective last year, would you say that applies to small field as well? Or is it still smart to bring it back from the trends that you are seeing? And just to recap last week's episode, one of the things I brought up in my lessons learned is that we are in a day and age where people build out their lineups through either sims, optimizers, 150 sets. And it seems almost normal now to start a lineup. I do this all the time when I hand build, with a quarterback, a pass catcher, so I have a stack, and then I am bringing it back with somebody on the other side. It almost feels like I'm setting that as just a standard rule. And in all of our optimizers and simulators, it's usually one of those things that we set up too. The data from last year said, because that's happening so much, you don't have as unique of lineup combinations as you think you could. And so I've just found myself saying, in certain tournaments, I'm willing to not always have a bring back. And I would say in small field, it might be even more important, considering like the lineup combinations are going to be a little bit simpler and not as wild.
Yeah, for sure. So like you said, we talked about this last week. We mentioned previously, it was like, if you're not doing this, you're behind the 8 ball. It's kind of like what it felt like 3 or 4 years ago. And now it's like, okay, well, everybody was doing it for 3 or 4 years. Now I have to do this, or this lineup can't win. And basically what we were just saying is like, that's not necessarily true. And I mentioned one example of that last year being like, in certain game environments, I've talked myself out of certain stacks, certain players in games, because I'm like, I don't really want to stack up this game. But at the same time, like, the example I mentioned last week was like, if the Bengals and Ravens are playing and Lamar and Zay just roll, but Burrow falls on his face, the Bengals don't score points, like, you may have talked yourself out of that because you didn't stack the game. It's like, well, there's blowouts all the time in the NFL, and you don't necessarily have to have a team on the other side. If one team just scores 30 points and it's 30-10, like, you probably could have used some of those pieces on the team that scored 30. So I'm trying to be, I think, mindful of when I use it this year versus saying like, I'm not using it anymore. I definitely will still be using it, especially if I think there is a game that's going overlooked cumulatively in roster percentage, like the quarterback's only going to be 5%, and I can get a wide receiver on both sides of the game that are both going to be low rostered. It makes sense to bet on that game because nobody else is betting on that game. You know what I mean? So I just think we want to be more thoughtful in like when you use it, how to use it, and like how often to use it, versus saying like I used to use it, I'm not doing it anymore, or I need to keep doing it. It's obviously very game and slate dependent.
Yep. I think you shared it in a nuanced way. There are very few dogmatic directives in DFS. That's my alliteration for the day. Dogmatic directives in DFS.
Wow, that was nice.
In other words, like there's very few things where you're like, don't do this at all. Don't ever do this. Especially when somebody shows me a lineup and they're like, what do you think about this? And I'm usually like, I mean, it could work. The NFL is crazy. We're going to go through some data later on in the Millie Maker. And I loved when I came up with this answer from looking at all of them. But like Ben Sinnott won somebody a Millie last year with 4 points.
I think that's the
wild?
perfect way to frame DFS. If somebody asks you about a lineup and if it can win, just look at the Millie Maker winners and be like, dude, anything can work. You know what I mean? Because half the time those lineups are like, I don't even know how you could logically think through that scenario. It has to be a projection-driven optimizer, weird, type of thing. So I think that the thing that this game has taught me a lot in terms of DFS is one, like you can't really predict the NFL, period. But two, it's really hard to predict like what combinations of players are going to be optimal, because it's salary based and obviously a lot of this is roster percentage based. And so it's like, man, if you have a question about could this work in DFS, the answer is probably yes. If you just go back and look at the Million Maker winners in the last like 5 years, I mean, it's obscene.
When I win this year,
you're talking into existence.
Yeah.
Millionaire Kyle. All right.
Well, I've said it before on the podcast. I'm not telling my wife. I'm just going to casually bring it up later.
But there will be signs.
Oh yes, there will be. But I can tell you this: when I win big tournaments, there is no part of me that's like, or at least like what I want to make clear is like I figured out the right combination of how to do it. It's usually going to end up, holy crap, how did I fall into this? Like that's like, and even just think about how a game plays out. Like, it's so odd, the combination of drives, which ones stall, which one gets an extra drive at the end. If you had Bears at all last year, like Chicago Bears, you had so many fourth quarter points that like came out of nowhere. If you would have had Bears lineups the first half of most of the games, it would have done nothing. Or vice versa. Tyler Warren, one of my favorite players, dominated the first half of games. Like, the percentage of his points that showed up in the first half was the second highest percentage of any wide receiver tight end in the game. And then the second half, it was just dead because of the variance and the way that things played out. So my point is, there's some weird combinations. You can't control all of it. It doesn't mean we shouldn't try, but at the end of the day, like when I look up and I see, like how these things were made, like I'm going to adjust a little bit, like not always having to have a bring back, but yeah, I'm going to have a lot of bringbacks.
For sure. And I think one thing to also consider, I mentioned slate dependent. Like if you're playing the smaller slate, especially as we get towards like Thanksgiving and the postseason, and we talk about this all the time, it feels like on those 3-game slates or whatever, like you have to have a piece of each. But like in those instances, I think there's more value in game stacking because it's like, hey, if I just get the game that has the most points and these other two dud, you can run away from the field really quickly. Whereas like on a main slate with 13 games or 14 games, like you might have to have like the best player from each game to some degree, put some combination of that together in a large field tournament to win. And it feels impossible to do, right? So it's just, I think it's slate dependent for me.
Next one is from Skull Holt, Vikings fan. He says, how many cash lineups do you guys build and enter? Just trying to optimize one and roll with the variance, or maybe build two and you hedge a little bit. He says he tends to do one lineup and roll with it, but he was curious with the professional's take. We've shared before in the podcast, but we are 99% of the time a one lineup for cash type of crew.
I don't think I've ever played two cash lineups.
I've done it a couple of times here and there, but over the last 5-6 years, and I didn't share it with you, of course.
I would laugh at you, dude. Yeah, one lineup, you put that in. I put the same lineup in head-to-heads, in 50-50s, double-ups. Any cash contest I'm playing in, it's the exact same lineup. It just helps to reduce, I think, the variance in terms of like your decision-making and understanding like, well, yeah, I wish I would have put that lineup in this contest and that one in that contest. And you can like chase your tail doing that. So for me, I stick to one lineup and I play that in all my head-to-heads and all my double-ups.
Yeah. I think from us giving analysis, it's also easier when we come back on a Tuesday episode during the season to just share, here was our cash lineup. We also write articles, all these things that we try to share. So I think from us explaining things, here's our cash lineup, here's our process, here's how we went about it. And I don't think it's wrong to do two. So like if you want to do it, that's your flow, that's fine. I just think it's easier from an entering standpoint, especially if you're doing a bunch of head-to-heads and you realize 20, 30 minutes before lock, hey, these aren't getting picked up. Then I don't want to have to go through every single random little lineup and figure out which ones to cancel, which ones to not. So it's also nice, at the very end, when I show Betz my screenshot, I'm in the green. I'm like, hey, this is the lineup. And he's like, cool, brother. I didn't have that one player. Because that's what usually happens between us. It's I went this way this week, you went that way, and that sucks when that happens.
Yeah. Should we just be lame and play the exact lineup every single week? Same one?
I've thought about that before.
No, I would never.
Let me finish. I've thought about that before. But you know me. There's a certain part of me that's if somebody else is doing this, I will not do it.
Contrarian Kyle.
It's so hard with cash because you're not supposed to be contrarian. It changes me. It shapes me. I have been forged in the fires.
We actually have a couple more questions about cash, so let's get into those next.
All right, go for it.
This one came in from Twitter, actually. Do you think optimizers have killed the edge in DFS cash games? This is from Connor McClay on Twitter. Lineups feel so condensed now that everyone plays the same core. I ended up giving up on cash and having more fun building tournament lineups. Or do you trust the process that 1 to 2 different plays can get you over that cash line?
That's a good question. I'll put it this way. You do you. You figure out what's fun for you in DFS, but optimizers have killed some edges, but not all of them. That would be my first little way of saying that. There are certain edges that over time projections have gotten better than they were 5-10 years ago. But I still think that at the end of the day, when you play cash, it actually helps you in the process for building tournament lineups too. So it's not just in its own little world that playing cash that's all it's good for. Is it sexy? No. But I still think that there is a way to go about this so that you're conscious of what everybody else is doing, but you're still figuring out what the best plays are. And we've found out over time you can be profitable.
For sure. I think just to speak to the optimizer thing, for cash games in particular, essentially, if you're doing that and some people just prefer to run the optimal of whatever projection provider they use and say, this is the optimal this week, I'm going to play it. And I think that can be good and bad. On one hand, you're at least not making silly, dumb mistakes and giving up 10 points of projection against the field, which is massive in today's edge where there's not as much edge as there used to be. On the other hand, if you are only playing optimal lineups based off of numbers and projections, I think you lose the art of DFS, especially when you think that you might have a different take than the field. And if that take is correct, you can have an awesome week, whether it's cash or tournaments. And so I think through some specific scenarios of if you're just playing the optimal, you can't give up 1 point of projection or your team won't win. No, that's not going to happen. What if you are, I mentioned that example earlier, I don't worry about the weather too much, but there's one example where one guy's in a perfect environment, one guy's in a dome, the other guy's in 40 degrees and whipping rain. Sure, maybe you just want to use that as a tiebreaker. Or, hey, this guy projects well, this running back projects pretty well, but have you considered they're down 2 linemen today? That type of stuff. That it's hard to project that, and it's hard to get that accurate in projections. And so sometimes I think that there's value in,
value, you say,
considering how accurate you think those projections might be. In week 1, I will tell you, they will not be very accurate because we're going off of weeks of camp reports, things that we think might happen versus data. Whereas in week 6, 7, 8, they're probably going to be pretty accurate because we have an idea of play calling tendencies for new play callers, which by the way, there's half the league this year. We have a bunch of different teams, changing locations in terms of players. And so there's so many variables in week 1 and 2. The projections might not be super valuable or at least be accurate. In weeks 8, 9, 10, they will be more accurate. So I think blindly playing the optimizer lineup in cash, you probably could do pretty well for the most part. But if you want to push your edge, you should consider how accurate you think those projections are in a given week.
I think that's a really good point. And everyone's playing in a different way. Some people have not much time. They're paying for a service and they just say, spit it out, tell me what to play. That's not really how we teach DFS very much. Like, we're trying to get people to learn the process to understand the why behind it. But you can be profitable in so many different ways. It is interesting with the way that we kind of have, like, I have a follow-up here from Colin. He says, kind of building off this idea of cash, how in the world do we beat sim train lineups this year in cash? Is it just better projections coming down to 1 to 2 player differences? If you'll notice, like, next time you play cash, maybe not week 1, but, move down throughout the year, you'll be like, why are there so many people with the same lineup? Some people pay for that service and everyone just plays the same lineup and they all jump on together. It does adjust the roster percentages though, like in cash, which we usually don't care about, but we'll say something on the podcast like, man, this guy will be popular. And then you look up on a Sunday like, oh my gosh, 80% of the people played this guy. That was way more than I thought. It's because there's so much content now that we figured out what's helpful and what's not. Like, what's a good projection? What's somebody's good at a good price point? So I think it comes back to this because in Connor's original question, he said, I ended up giving up on cash and having more fun building tournament lineups. Brother, I get it. Building a tournament lineup is super fun, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I also would just say, like, measuring success in DFS, you can do it in a bunch of different time frames. If you go slate to slate, you will go crazy because you will just be chasing your tail saying, I sucked on the main slate, now I'm going to Sunday, and then I'm going to Monday, and then I'm going to Thursday, and I guess I'll play NBA DFS because they say it's good. Like, that's what you'll end up doing.
Why are you looking directly at me when you say that?
No, that's fine. I'm going to
made direct eye contact and basically just talked right at me right there.
But then if you look at your success week to week, you will feel the wave. Like, I look at my cash lineups and my, head-to-heads, and it's like, okay, this week I was at, 70%. The next week, I'm at 27%. And you can just feel that. If you look year to year, like if that's the time frame you're looking at, you can be like, hey, I was profitable this year. And we would say that if you learn the game the right way, and the way that we've talked about on the podcast the last 5 or 6 years, over time, it will bear out. It's just like when you're zeroing in on week to week or slate to slate, like that's where it gets discouraging.
Yeah, and I think you have to be able to not do that. Like, obviously, if you're taking this seriously, you're going to track your profit and your loss each week.
Just get punched in the nuts over and over and over again, and then get back up.
And you'll feel nothing when you lose a slate. You'll feel nothing by the end. It's great. But like
and when
you were
you
saying,
win, you'll feel nothing.
Yeah, I feel nothing Monday mornings. Whether I win or lose, I feel nothing. All I care about is if Van Jefferson had less than 2.5 catches. If you are trying to play this game on a week-to-week basis, but sustain it over a full season or multiple seasons, like if you just look at week prior results, you might be like, I'm a bad cash player. But if you zoom out, you might be like an awesome cash player. You know what I mean? Like if you look at your results for the last 4 years. I remember a couple years ago, there was a stretch to start the year where you were on absolute fire. You were like cashing 6, 7, 8 weeks in a row. And I lost 5 weeks in a row. And
you had a bad start that year, I remember.
Yeah, I was down, Kyle, and I had to redeposit over and over again. Monica got the kids in the car, saw the taillights drive off. But looking at those results, if I just considered that month, I'd be like, I'm not good at cash. But I know if I zoom out and I look at each year, I'm profitable every year at the end of the season. So if you're just trying to look at this on a week-to-week basis, you will probably get bad information. Like, it's hard to win tournaments, right? If you're setting good tournaments with a stack and low roster players and all those sort of things, you might just not win for 7 weeks because, well, it's really hard to win a tournament. But in week 8, all of a sudden you won. Does that mean that you just became a better player overnight? No, of course not, right? So you need to be able to zoom out and look at this thing throughout the whole season and multiple years.
Yeah, next week we will have Chris Cash on to talk tournament strategy. And I know that Chris will be honest. Him and I were talking this week, and he was kind of sharing about how it went after the preseason game. He's like, Borg, I don't think you understand. This might have been the worst slate I've ever had in my entire life. And he went in detail. Maybe we'll share some next week. But he's somebody that we think of as a good tournament player. People respect him, and he has moments like that, or has moments in cash. So it's zooming out. I think that's really hard to do, especially because everybody lives off of what they saw online or, who posted, hey, I hit this prop, this 10-leg parlay, but I'm actually down 10K over the last year.
Don't worry about that.
Don't tell anyone that. Let's take a quick break. We'll be right back.
Insurance isn't one size fits all. That's why drivers have trusted Progressive's Name Your Price tool for years. Just tell Progressive what you want to pay, and they'll show you coverage options that fit your budget. Visit Progressive.com to find a car insurance rate that works for you. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law.
When you're a maintenance engineer in a beverage manufacturing plant, you keep production lines moving and quality on track because there's no room for slowdowns. With Grainger's vast selection of high-quality motors, sensors, belts, and hard-to-find parts, you can get what you need fast and all in one place, so nothing gets in the way of getting the job done. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
All right, this next one is from your boy RoboFitz165. Is that enough energy for you?
That was better. Thank you. You got your radio voice back.
I was going to say, face for radio, they say. Hey, I love the podcast and the advice weekly. I'm thinking of starting doing the 20 max tournament on DK. Discussing players, you often state you'll be underweight or overweight on a certain player. What exposure levels would you consider somebody to be targeted or underweight or overweight? So basically, Betz, we probably need to explain what we mean by underweight or overweight. We probably need to talk about roster percentages and ownership percentages. And then I do have an example for us in a second that I think will kind of show people like, here's how we look at it week to week. But like when we say underweight or overweight, what do we mean on the podcast?
Yeah, essentially what we're looking at is basically just, across a portfolio of lineups, if you're doing a 150, 20 max, as this example says, or even if it's just like, for me, I play, generally speaking, somewhere around like 5 to 6, maybe a little bit more, but I'm not running 50 lineups on a main slate for a small field. I'm just doing a few. If you're saying you're over or underweight, basically what you're looking at is the projected roster percentage for a certain player. So there's the most popular quarterback or running back of the week. Let's use running back as an example because it's easier. There will be times where the best running back play, point per dollar gets steamed up to 25%, 30%. If you want to be overweight that player, you're saying, I'm getting 40%, 50% of that player. You're just using that line of projection and building that amount into your lineups. If you want to be underweight, obviously you'd be less than that 30% that we're projecting. And I think it's really hard to answer, like, what does that mean? Like, because it's all risk-based and it's all about how much you think there's an edge in fading or being overweight or playing into a certain player. Like, there might be times where, like, I play 20% instead of 30%. And technically I'm underweight, but I still like that guy, And it's more just about what other players you're willing to play at certain roster percentages, and that's going to kind of dictate how much or how little you have of a certain player.
Yeah, ultimately, when we talk about roster percentages or ownership percentages, we mostly look at large field tournaments because they give us a bigger data set. Like Millie Maker, it's like, hey, I want to see 200,000 lineups. And that's way more helpful in understanding a percentage of lineups and, who's popular, who's not. But really what we're asking is, what is the field doing? What do we think the field is doing? We have projections in the optimizer that you can find on our roster percentage report in the DFS pass. And that is basically taking historical averages of what this player who is projected for this points at this salary historically, this is how popular they've been. Now there's some other parts of the algorithm that measures like how popular are they, how much are they getting talked about online and all that other stuff. But like, it's usually pretty good. There will be some, weeks that it's off and it's projecting what we think humans are going to do. But let me give you an example. This was in November, and I write an article every week that's called the Tournament Takes article. Wrote that the last couple of years. But basically all I do is I just go through the roster percentages for each position and say, hey, this guy looks to be popular. Here's a stance that you could take on the field, underweight or overweight. And this week was interesting because Jaylen Warren at 6,100 and Chase Brown, which is wild to see that he's at 5,700, were projected to be the two most popular running backs on the slate. And then CMC was right behind them at 9K. But like, the weird thing was Jaylen Warren and Chase Brown were in the same game. So before knowing the outcome of that game, Betz, if you knew that Jaylen Warren would be the most popular running back and Chase Brown probably the second or third most in the same game. If you're playing in a tournament, what's the game theory? How could you approach this?
I mean, I could see people playing like wide receiver stacks instead just to pivot and saying like, I'm only playing one of these running backs. I think a lot of people do that, right? They see the highest projected for the week in terms of roster percentage and saying like, okay, I like two of these guys, I'm not playing all three, or I like one of these guys, I'm not playing all three, and kind of leveling in some ways. I think that's pretty common.
Yeah, and in this instance, like Jaylen Warren got seamed up. We projected him for 31%. He went all the way up to 40% in the Millie Maker. Chase Brown was at 21%. We had him projected for 26%. So, we had them projected for the most popular. You could look at this and say, here's the most popular running backs on the slate. And you mentioned, I'll just grab one of them. You're actually not creating any leverage on the field, though. Like, you're basically just kind of going in with what everybody else is doing when you're building lineups. And so I remember writing up this game, and I went back and read it. I was like, well, the way you do it is you play the wide receivers, in the same game. Or I said, hey, if this game bottoms out, you gain so much leverage on the field because everybody is huddled to this one game, and the Bengals defense was bad. So I kind of understand why you would go around this game. I'm pretty sure what I did that week is I said, these guys are great cash plays, but I can poke holes in Jaylen Warren and in his projection, especially because he kind of ends up splitting time. And it was so interesting. The Steelers won 34-12. Aaron Rodgers got hurt, and the touchdowns got spread out. Kenny Gainwell actually was the one that scored twice that week. So Warren was irrelevant. And the other thing I wrote up is Chase Brown's a great play, but if he doesn't hit 20 points in a tournament, which is he had only done once that year, then you can find it somewhere else. Chase Brown was fine. He scored 18 points, but he wasn't essential in tournaments. And so when we talk about going overweight or underweight, we're saying look at the roster percentages, look at the game environments, and kind of figure out the routes of like if you're playing, let's just call it 100 lineups, just that makes the math easy. Then Jaylen Warren is projected for 31%. We would say, man, maybe you gain more if you only play him in 20 lineups at 20% than you would 31%. And you gain a lot of leverage. Like that's the thing that I love about tournaments and sifting through the roster percentages if you can gain leverage.
For sure. And I also want to caveat this conversation too, because I think if you're just listening to this specific example where we're talking about coming underweight Jaylen Warren in week whatever that was last year, like there will be moments where the highest rostered player, sometimes I feel is not rostered enough. Like I think that player is an awesome play and the field's only going to play him at 20%. Like give me 40%.
You'll push it.
Just really bully him in the lobby, Kyle. So there are moments where the top projected guy, we do feel a little bit queasy about. We do want to come in underweight. But there's also times where it's like, the field might not be playing them enough, So don't listen to this and say, oh, whoever the most popular running back is that week, I have to fade. No, not necessarily. They're good plays for a reason. And a ton of data over the years has shown, generally speaking, across enough sample size, the best tournament lineups have some combination of the best projected plays, the popular plays, right? And a few lower roster plays. So you don't want to just automatically come in underweight because you think you should do that in DFS every week. That's not always going to be the case.
Yeah, like CMC, who was a very popular player that week, scored 35 points and was awesome at 9K. Right below him was Bijan, who wasn't super popular. He was at 8,300. He scored 33 points. But I did find another player here who was only 6,600, was rostered just 4% in the field. So if a player whose name I'm not mentioning is not popular in tournaments, what do we do, Betz?
Oh, is this Derrick Henry?
It is Derrick Henry.
What did he do that week?
23.
Oh, at 6,600, that's great.
Oh, it's great. And it's great at only 4% rostered. It was bigger, my point. But like, you use those things, they're little leverage points. But yeah, don't just throw out somebody because they're popular. You kind of want to go through the list, and we talk about all those things in the podcast. But I love talking through those things because they're just little levers you can pull. I know next week we'll talk about that more with Chris, tournament strategy and what are some ways to gain leverage on the field. But breaking down that game, like I'm sure we broke down Steelers and Bengals, and we said, man, Jaylen Warren's a good play. But here's the other side of it if not. And those are the things you kind of work through. All right, I got one more question here, and I think it's a good one. It's from Hank and Jack74. He says, I'm wondering what was the best optimal flex position that was used on the Millie Maker last week or any large field tournament. Was it a running back, wide receiver, or the always sexy 2 tight ends? And then the last question was, did Pitts and Otton win someone $1 million last year? So I went through the data, but before I went through the data, I asked you this question. I said, Betz, what do you think was the optimal flex from just vibes? Because you're a vibes-based guy.
That's the only way to play. Vibes. I mean, that's everything. And if I'm being totally honest, the vibe I had last year was, somebody at DraftKings, can you please give us a playable wide receiver below 4,500? Because they did not exist last year, right? 3 or 4 years ago, we would always find one guy in the 3Ks that you're like, I'll plug him in and give me 8 points, or I could see 12 points here. Like every week, man, in cash, it's like you kind of had to play like balanced wide receiver lineups and spend up elsewhere, or like kind of fit this a weird hoop last year where it was like a lot of 2 tight end lineups are projecting well because we have fewer wide receivers running routes and they're too expensive on DraftKings for the most part. So I would say last year, just based off of thinking through that, I think there were way more tight end flex lineups that were winning lineups than maybe in previous seasons.
Yeah, I think our advice over time or over the last 5 years has been wide receivers in the flex and a full PPR site, generally speaking, does well. However, wide receiver scoring was down, except for the very top last year. Like you remember Puka, you remember, JSN, but running back scoring was up by a ton. There's a lot of elite running backs. If you played redraft, you understood. So going through the 18 weeks of top 1% lineups. So I was looking at top 1% who finished in the top 1%. It was running backs way more than I remembered. Like it was running backs almost 60% of the time. And then wide receivers came in lower than tight end. There was a stretch, Betz, week 13, 14, 15, 16, where tight end was the optimal in the top 1%. And I mentioned earlier, Ben Sinnott ended up in a lineup. Who else? Oh, Harold Fannin in the flex one week. If you did a Tennessee Cleveland stack, that one's interesting. And then Colby Parkinson, Ben Sinnott, Kyle Pitts, remember at the end of the year, had some crazy awesome weeks where he essentially like broke fantasy. So it did happen more than we thought. And I think here's what I want to bring up. In looking at this data, it's one thing to say this is what the field is doing this week. To say, hey, everybody's playing running backs in the flex this week. But what I found is that the weeks when the running backs were the optimal play, the field wasn't doing it enough. Like they were like, oh, well, half of my lineups I'll do running backs and half I'll do wide receivers, when really that week you needed to be 75% running backs as the play. And so it's more of kind of seeing like in the flex, if you think there's an edge, you should probably push it rather than hedge it in your lineups.
For sure. I think that's a great way to put it. And at the end of the day, when you're thinking about some of this DFS game theory stuff, there aren't a ton of weeks where we are, as players, fortunate enough to finish in the top 5 in a tournament, let alone win the whole thing, right? And so if you think you have an edge, like you said, you should push it because you don't get many shots to do that, right? So I think that's a great point. And this fits today's NFL, I think, right? Where there are fewer 3 wide receiver sets in the field. There are a lot more tight ends in the field than there used to be. Pass attempts per year are declining like 5 straight years. So this data fits last year. Now that's descriptive. Will it flip back this year? Who knows? It probably depends on pricing and value perspective from a points per dollar, how many options we get at wide receiver. But I think if pricing stays kind of similar to what it was last year, it's going to be hard to justify playing a player in flex that's not projected very well just because I want to get different at wide receiver, So I remember that in cash a lot last year too, just like scraping the bottom of the barrel. Because like when I write my article, I try to give like, here's something at the top tier, who's who I like in the middle tier, and then trying to go like below 5K, below 4K. And like last year it was like, I wouldn't play these guys. You know what I mean? So I think it was a pricing thing last year for sure.
I think that's a great point of like the context of what DFS, the salary structure was in 2025, very different than 2021.
Totally.
Where it's like, oh man, give me that dirty wide receiver at 3,500 that we could project for 7 targets.
Give me Mac Hollins on the Raiders at 3,200. Brother, those were the days.
And for those scoring at home, yes, of course, Cade Otton was in the winning lineup on Millie Maker in week 9. The dude at 3,900 put up 17.2 points. I'm pretty sure that was his only good week of the year.
I love Cade. Love that guy.
So, yeah, that was a Baker triple stack that week with a Travion bring back. Devon Achane in the lineup went for 43.5. Gibbs, so wow, you get Achane and Gibbs in the same lineup. And then the Jets defense went for 19. So that's probably part of it. I hate saying it. We don't talk about defense very much. Maybe we should. But like, come on, if you're going to win $1 million, you got to get a crazy awesome defense that week.
You need multiple sacks, you need multiple picks, you need a interception return for a touchdown. That's where you just invite chaos and hope for the best.
Yep. That's going to do it for this episode. Betz, why don't you sign us off and tell the people Chris Cash is coming next week?
Yeah, you know why Chris Cash is coming next week? Because I am going to the beach, suckers.
Yeah, baby.
I will not be here, so I will miss you guys, but I'll see you in 2 weeks ahead of the live show. Cash is back next week to fill in for me. Should be an awesome show. I can't wait to listen to his tournament strategy, his takes, how to make us more profitable in 2026. We'll see you then. Have a great week.
Thank you for listening to another edition of the Fantasy Footballers DFS and Betting Podcast. Don't forget to visit us on the web at thefantasyfootballers.com.
In the U.S., there's a break-in every 26 seconds. But when intruders step near, Simply Safe Home Security steps up.
Stop. This is Simply Safe. Police are on the way.
Using AI alerts, U.S.-based live agents help deter break-ins. Simply Safe, no long-term contracts. Save 60% on a new system with professional monitoring during our 20th anniversary sale at simplysafe.com/SXM.
Outdoor deterrence requires a Simply Safe Active Guard outdoor protection plan starting at $49.99 a month. Visit simplysafe.com/licenses for alarm license information. Tennessee 2012.